What is up, everyone? Mark here, and welcome to Prepared Pantry Presents. Today, we're squarely into pumpkin spice season, and I wanted to do a pumpkin spice cookie. Now, pumpkin is a wet, pulpy ingredient. It tends to be used in recipes where it can use those characteristics to an advantage, like it makes very nice, moist pumpkin bread. And it tends to make cakier things like cakier cookies. I want to do a thin, crispy cookie. One of my favorite kinds of cookies are thin, crispy chocolate chip cookies, the kind where the sugars and the butter sort of caramelize and it's just breaks apart, melt in your mouth, delicious. I want that, but with pumpkin spice. It's a little bit more difficult to do with a wet ingredient added to the mix like pumpkin. I think I may have found a way to do it using good old-fashioned baking wisdom and a little bit of science. And we're going to give it a shot and see how it goes. Before we get started, I want to thank you all again for your continued support of the channel. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Share it on social media for your friends and family. Make sure that you're subscribed if you're not already. Click the red button down below, or you can click the watermark over in the corner of the video. When you do, just hit the bell icon to make sure you get a notification every time I have a new video out. All right, it's thin and crispy pumpkin cookies. Let's get started. Okay, so how we're making this work, for one, is we're starting with a basic recipe for a thin chocolate chip cookie, a thin crispy chocolate chip cookie. We're just making some modifications to it to add pumpkin and pumpkin spice flavor. So our ingredients are 1 1/3 cups of all-purpose flour, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon each of allspice, cinnamon, ginger, and nutmeg. We have 10 tablespoons of unsalted butter. We have about a cup of pumpkin butter. I'll get to that in a minute. We have a couple of teaspoons each of cornstarch and additional flour. I'll get to that also in a minute. We have 1/2 cup of white sugar, 1/3 cup of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, 1 egg, a tablespoon of milk, and 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Now, the pumpkin butter. This is part of how we're going to get pumpkin flavor into this without causing a problem. Essentially, all this is 1 can of 1 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree with a couple of tablespoons of butter, reduced for a little while over medium heat. Added about 1/8 teaspoon each of cinnamon, allspice, nutmeg, and ginger, and just stirred it constantly and kept it going until it started to get more dry, more crumbly, sort of the texture of like a thick peanut butter or a dry cookie dough. That's exactly what we want. We wanted to drive off as much moisture as we can, so it's kind of darkened and sort of gotten a more rich flavor. We don't have to worry about that water really contributing to making the cookies soggy. So we're going to use this in a couple of different ways. One way is we're going to heat it up with the butter when we melt the butter and mix that together and just incorporate it so that it's sort of a pumpkin butter. And we're going to add a little bit of cornstarch and a little bit of flour to the remaining pumpkin butter and kind of crumble that with a fork, get it to a consistency where it's sort of a dry crumble, almost like the pea-sized pieces of butter when you're making biscuits. So that we'll do as a mix-in with the cookies at the end, sort of in place of using chocolate chips, which the original recipe would call for. The amounts are a little bit different, but hopefully we're just going to get just as much pumpkin flavor distributed throughout. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is add our baking soda, salt, cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, and allspice to our flour mixture. And just whisk this together to get it combined. Then on this side, we can whisk together the brown sugar and the white sugar. Now, we're going to take about 1/3, let's say about 1/3 of our pumpkin butter and add it to our butter, our dairy butter. And again, you can see it has an almost dry and crumbly consistency, and that is perfect. That's exactly what we want for what we need it for. So this will help flavor a little bit more. So the pumpkin in with the butter will help flavor the butter and hence flavor the cookies. And this will become a crumble to be mixed in at the end and hopefully add some chunky bits of pumpkin flavor also. All right, so I'm going to put this in the microwave for about 45 seconds to a minute and come back and we'll mix it up. Okay, so I'm going to get this mixed up until the pumpkin butter is almost completely dissolved in the melted butter. Now, one of the other changes we made to this recipe over the plain thin chocolate chip cookies is there's a little bit of additional butter in here, and that is to account for some butter that I'm sure is going to be soaked up by the presence of all of this pumpkin. All right, that is our pumpkin butter. Now we are going to take a little bit at a time maybe a teaspoon at a time of cornstarch and flour. And get this mixed with a fork. And again, I want this to turn into a crumble, really. And you do want to try and mix this as best you can. And the addition of the extra flour and starch here kind of helps absorb any additional water that's still left in this mix, which is important because we don't want that water to leach out and make the crispy cookie soggy. If you're going to go to a lot of trouble to make a crispy cookie, you want a crispy cookie. Okay, I think that's good and crumbly. We can crumble a little further as we mix it into the batter or the dough. So I'm not too worried about that. Now, we are going to add our pumpkin butter to our sugars. And the corn syrup. And I want to get this as thoroughly combined as I can get it until all of the sugar is sort of equally wet in the pumpkin butter. Okay, that looks good. We are done with those. Now we're going to add 1 egg. And I'm just going to break this up a little bit before I dump it in. The egg is going to go in, and our vanilla, and the milk. To get this mixed until it too is thoroughly combined. Okay, now we want to slowly add our flour mixture, about 1/3 at a time, and mix it until it's fully incorporated. We don't want to overmix it. This already smells delicious. I can smell the pumpkin, I can smell those spices. By infusing that pumpkin butter into the fat of the dairy butter, I'm hoping that we really help bloom and bring out some of the flavors of those spices. The allspice, the ginger, the cinnamon, and the nutmeg. A little bit more flour. And keep it mixing. And the last of the flour. You can see this is definitely a sort of sticky, pasty cookie dough, sort of like gooey peanut butter. Okay, now this is the tricky part. I want to get this crumble of pumpkin evenly distributed in here without mixing it up so hard that I bash all the little pumpkin stuff into smithereens. I want it to be sort of discernible crumbles of pumpkin. All right, have this kind of folded in on itself, just to get all those pumpkin bits kind of sealed on the inside. I don't know, guys. What do you think? How do you think this is going to turn out? You think we're going to have crispy cookies? Hopefully it's tasty cookies either way. I'm going to get a couple of things cleaned up here. We're going to come back and drop these on some cookie sheets. All right, let's drop some cookies. So I think this is going to make about 20 cookies, but I'm not sure. It might be a little more than that, might be a little less. Because I know these are going to very likely be thin cookies, I'm going to give them plenty of room on the cookie sheets, at least a couple inches apart. So I'm probably only going to put about 6 per cookie sheet. They're going to go in a 350-degree oven for about 12 minutes, give or take. I'll rotate them halfway through to make sure that they cook evenly. But we're just going to do this, about rounded tablespoonfuls of the cookie dough. And doesn't necessarily need to be round. Okay, so these are going to go in a 350-degree oven. Like I said, about 12 minutes, 6 minutes, and I'll swap. They're going to come out and they're going to go right under the wire racks for about 5 minutes. And then I'm just going to pull the cookie sheets out and leave the parchment right on the wire racks for the cookies to cool completely. They will need to cool completely in order for them to be crispy if they have any hope of being crispy. While these are in the oven, I will continue with forming the rest of our cookies on another set of cookie sheets, and I'll come back when we're ready to pull them from the oven. Okay, so this didn't go exactly as I planned. After the first 6 minutes, when I was going to flip them over, I noticed that they really weren't spreading. I think the pumpkin was just a little bit too much to let the batter be runny enough to spread. So I put a sheet of parchment over each sheet of cookies and pressed them down to make them about 1/8 of an inch thick each with a big, broad spatula. So I artificially flattened these. So then I rotated them, had them bake for an additional 6 minutes. They still weren't quite where I wanted them to be, so rotated them again and had them bake for another 6 minutes. So it was about 18 minutes altogether. So from there, they could kind of turn south really quickly. So, I washed them really closely. I was looking for this sort of, brown caramelized edge to develop on a lot of the cookies, and I think it did. So I think what we ended up with here are cookies that are nice and crispy and crunchy along the edges, and a little bit chewier as you move towards the centers. I think that's just kind of is what it is. I won't call this a failure, but I'm not really calling it a super success either. I did take a little bit of powdered sugar, confectioner's sugar, and cinnamon, and mix that together and sift it on top of each just to be a little bit extra. But you can see, it does have hallmarks of a crunchy cookie. So let's see. Yep. Crunchy on the outside, chewy in the center. A little bit of a compromise, but tasty nonetheless. Kind of like a pumpkin ginger snap. You can actually kind of taste the little chunks of pumpkin. And the powdered sugar kind of covers them up, but you can see them. There are sort of dark spots here and there. I am quite certain I could stand here and eat all 20 of these cookies without any problem whatsoever. I will not do that. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this one. Guys, if you like the video, if you like the recipe, give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, and we'll see you in the next one.